Alright, I wanted to make a little video today kind of going over this guitar I picked up a few days ago. This is an Abilene is the brand. Hopefully that's visible. I don't make videos often, so hopefully you can see that. Abilene model AS11R, made in Indonesia. So I saw this guitar on the Facebook Marketplace for $59, and I contacted the lady, and she said go see my son at such and such pawn shop. That's where they're selling it. So I went and talked to them, and they let me take this for $45, tax and everything. So it doesn't get much cheaper than that for a functioning electric guitar. So anyway, I just want to kind of go over the features, what's good about this, what's surprisingly really good about this guitar, what's not so good. Hopefully this will be of some use to somebody. I looked online and I actually couldn't find many that look like this. There were a couple of Abilenes that were kind of similar, but typically you're looking at less than $100. I think the ones I saw were around $75, something like that. So hopefully this info, or this video, will have some info that will be useful for somebody. So I'm just going to talk about the guitar, sort of each feature, kind of just going down the whole guitar as far as all the parts and hardware, things like that. So if you just want to hear it, you may want to fast forward because I'm going to talk for a while. So the Abilenes, I looked them up. There's not a ton of info out there, but they're made by Samick. This has no serial number on it, but I'm going to guess it's probably from the mid to late 90s would be my guess. Samick, of course, I believe Samick and Cort make all of the, or most of the Asian made guitars. They make parts for many different brands. So anyway, not a lot of info out there. That's about all I could find. But just starting at the headstock and going down. So we can start with these tuners up here. These tuners are surprisingly really good. I was expecting worse. I've played cheap strats, and they usually have, or cheap strat copies, usually have something kind of like this. One of these that sort of looks like a roof of a house back, and the keys are always real wobbly, and as you try to tune up, it's sort of slow, and then it jumps forward and it's too sharp, so you got to detune, stretch, and then go back up. These are not like that. They're much more solid and smooth feeling. Like you can get it tuned pretty easy with them. So I'm not worried about those tuners at all. Not going to change those anytime soon. And then the string tree, it's one of these old like button types there. I like the way those look. I've got a little like a roller style that I might swap it out for, but you know, for now I'm happy with that. Not a big deal. The nut, plastic nut, no surprises there. It was way too tall when I bought the guitar. I had to knock it off, shave some off the bottom just to get the nut action close to right. But the actual slots themselves are perfect. They've all got a nice, perfect sort of U shape. And you know, I played the old strings that were on this thing, and I put new ones on now. These are 9s, and yeah, I haven't heard a single kink or ping or anything coming out of that. So this thing stays in tune really well. So the nut I'm perfectly happy with, even though it's not bone or tusk or anything. So the frets. Oh, I should also say, getting into the specs, this is I think it's 1 5/8 inch at the nut, or it's whatever a Fender American Standard Telecaster is, because that's what I measured it against, and it's the same width. So that's good for me. That's what I like. When you look at import strats, one thing you have to watch out for, in my experience, is sometimes they'll shave a couple of millimeters off of that width, which doesn't sound like much, but even when they're really well set up, you'll be playing it, it just feels so skinny up here. To me, it's almost like playing a toy or like a kid's guitar or something. It's just a personal preference, but I don't like them to be any skinnier than that. I had an old Bullet Squire, like the lowest level Squire that I got with you know, planning on modding out and things like that, and it just felt way too skinny up there because it was a little bit more narrow than that. So anyway, moving on down, the frets on this thing are surprisingly almost perfect. I mean, I'd probably give the frets like a 9 out of 10. Perfect crowns. It looks like nobody really played this guitar much, even though it's kind of dingy here and there. There's like the tiniest bit of like scuffing, just a little bit on the first two. These down here look completely unplayed. I would say that a kid probably got this for Christmas, maybe took some lessons for a little while and stuck it in the closet, and then decided to pawn it, 20 years later, whatever, be my guess. Nowhere, anywhere down here. When I go up and down like this, I mean, I don't feel anything. So, the fretwork is close to perfect. There's one little spot here, I think it's on the 20th fret, where it's starting to, it's not seated all the way. So, I mean, there's a couple of little tiny imperfections, but, how often do I play a C right there? So, who cares? Overall, it's great. I bought this guitar, I mean, honestly, I just wanted a beater that I could sort of practice doing stuff to, like fret crowning and nut slotting and that kind of stuff. But so far, I haven't found anything that really needs to happen other than, taking a little off the bottom of the nut, which is not a difficult job. So, keep going. Oh yeah, and this is like a 12-inch radius on the fretboard. So, I like that. I like a, 10 to 12 is good for me. Moving on down the body, this is probably my least favorite thing about the guitar. It's a plywood body, which is not to me, I don't really care about the wood that it's made of as long as it's comfortable. But it's just a little bit thinner than normal, like just a hair. You can tell a real Fender Strat would be just a tiny bit thicker. And the reason that's a big deal to some people is that if you ever wanted to upgrade that trim block, if you buy a new one, it might hang out at the bottom if it's thicker than the body. I've played thinner ones before. That Bullet that I mentioned earlier had an exceptionally, like a much thinner body even than this. So that with the nut thinness, I mean, that guitar just, it was really good quality, but it never felt real to me, or, genuine, I guess you might say. So this one, it's a little thinner. That shape to me is like a little off. I don't know if it's like not curvy enough or something, but it's, maybe they have to change them a little bit. But it's just, the more I look at it, the more the shape doesn't look perfect. I mean, not that that matters a lot, but it's just, I might be crazy, but something about that shape just looks a little funny to me. Anyway, I guess the electronics, these pickups are, I keep saying this, surprisingly pretty good to me. They've got staggered pole pieces. And when I saw this advertised, I saw that, you see how these are a little discolored compared to the pickguard. I thought maybe somebody years ago got in there with or got in there and changed these out for something and just put different covers on them. So I thought maybe there's some really good single coils and the pawn shop guys just don't know it. But no, I took them out and they look like your typical ceramic bar magnet cheap Strat pickups. They've got staggered pole pieces, and really compared to a lot of cheap single coils, they're not nearly as shrill, overly bright. Unfortunately, I don't know the output, how many ohms they are. I don't know if these are 250 or 500K pots. I don't have anything to test that with, but not bad. I mean, I'm not in a big hurry to change them. I wanted to see how good I could make this guitar keeping it stock, not just changing everything out and just keeping the neck and body, but really see how good I could make it just through a setup. And oh man, it was horribly set up. I mean, the radius here was totally off. The high E string was way higher than the others for some reason. I don't know. I don't know if somebody else did that after the factory or what. But anyway, you got a pretty decent 3-ply pickguard in there. Looking at the tremolo, this is another place where you kind of run into kind of crappy territory. You can see how that block is super thin. I guess it's zinc. I don't know. Just barely thicker than the ball end of a string. I've got it decked because I don't have a bar to fit it, and I've got another guitar that's set to float, so I'm not really concerned about having a working trim on this one. But maybe a thicker block would fit there. This isn't, like I say, not as thin as some bodies, so I might end up upgrading that one day. But it's not a huge difference, or it doesn't seem noticeably thin sounding. The sustain is okay. The bridge itself, the saddle pieces, that was another place I ran into a little bit of trouble. You can see how these are kind of, I don't know, they're a little longer than normal. So when I was intonating it, I've got this low E backed all the way down to the, as far back as it'll go, and it's still ringing just a little bit sharp when you fret. So it'd probably be good to go back and get a little bit shorter pieces just so they have more back and forth wiggle room, so I can get this thing perfectly, or close to perfect, intonated. But again, for a $45 guitar, I'm not complaining. So yeah, I mean, this overall, I'm really impressed with this thing. It stays in tune as good as any guitar that I've got, and I think, like I said, the nut slots were filed really well. And sometimes I like to put just a tad of Vaseline in those slots after I've got the string stretched. That seems to give a little bit of lubrication. I know they make stuff like, you know, the nut saws and all that stuff, but if you just want to use something at home, I've always found the Vaseline seems to do pretty well. And decking the trim, stretching the strings, I mean, this thing, I played it the other day for like 3 days straight and it was still in pretty good tune, which unfortunately none of my other guitars will do that. So I guess that's about all there is to say about it. Overall, I'm impressed. If you happen to run across one of these, I recommend it. Maybe some of the stuff I've said would be useful for other cheap pawn shop Strat style guitars, hopefully. So I'll just play some sounds real quick. I'm plugged into a Tubescreamer clone going into a Peavey Classic 30. I've got all the EQs pretty much straight up and down. So I'll experiment with a, you know, reverb and distortion settings and just try to give you a good idea of what this thing sounds like. Hopefully this audio is okay. I'm not used to recording audio with this camera. But anyway, let's see. Yeah, so there you go. Just run through a few riffs I like. If you find one of these, pick them up, especially if it's 40 something dollars. You can't beat that. Yeah, so that's all. Hope this was helpful.